to So Fresh, So Prince. There we go, nailed it. My name is Andrew Apple, with me is Lorenzo Gordon.
Hello everybody.
So happy you could be with us again for the second episode of this podcast, where we talk about the first episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And Lorenzo, was this a good episode?
It was an amazing episode because we got introduced to Will Smith, and more importantly, the Banks family got introduced to Will Smith and all of his awesomeness and all of the things that make him Will Smith.
Which is exactly what we were asking for all 6 seasons. We wanted as much Will Smith as we could possibly fit onto the television screen.
Of course. And I mean, even from the theme song to the knock on the door, to his first engagement with Uncle Phil and everybody else in the family, it was a very eye-opening experience to see what world they were not living in.
So just to get everyone on the same page, in case the people who are listening haven't watched this episode, would you recap it for us? Just give us a couple minutes of that.
Just in case you're living under a rock. Will Smith went from playing basketball in Cobb's Park to flying first class to Bel-Air. He basically went from West Philadelphia to where everybody wants to live in California. And, he shows up on the doorstep, blasting Back to Life, Back to Reality in his Walkman. Yes, that's a thing that plays tapes, and, we'll get to that later. That's a whole nother technology speech. But anyways, he meets Jeffrey for the first time, who is the most proper man in the world, as I like to say. And he confuses him for Uncle Phil because, the last time he saw Uncle Phil, he was somewhere around that size, I would like to think. And then from then on, he's just figuring out that he now lives in a mansion. What used to be his apartment building, he now lives in that whole thing with one family instead of like 85. So obviously Will Smith is going through some, I say, culture shock, if you will. He gets to meet his Aunt Vivian, who is so loving and embracing to him, and embraces him and makes sure that he feels comfortable, while Uncle Phil gives him the ominous look over the shoulder of father that he always does for a son. And he tries to set them straight from jump. And that's when we first find out that Uncle Phil and Will have a very interesting relationship, just from the jokes that ensue in that point. From then on, we find out that Jeffrey takes him to his room, shows him where he's going to be living and whatnot, and then he slowly but surely begins to meet the family. I believe first with Ashley. Little Tatiana Ali, baby Tatiana, and we'll get to see her as she grows up, but we got to see her as a baby, or as a baby as I like to call her, because she was definitely under 10 or 11. And then, Uncle Phil comes in and introduces him to his cousin Carlton, whom he does not recognize at all. At all. You know how you have those cousins who you haven't seen in like 10 years and you just, hey,
it's you.
Yeah, like what do we used to do together? Yeah. And then pretty much from then on, Will continuously gets to be thrown into this gauntlet of upper class living from West Philadelphia, and finds out he is invited to a very, very extremely high class party, and he doesn't know exactly how to take it. So when he does come down in his, I would say, half a tuxedo, he comes in the chest cummerbund, the blazer, and the neon that we all know him for, and the Jordans. Who can forget the Jordans with the slacks? From then on, he continues to meet and confuse these people from Bel-Air. That's pretty much just what he does. He just confuses them. And then we get to my favorite scene, the dinner table, when he actually has to sit down and be quiet with these high, upper-class lawyers from Bel-Air. And he finds out that the crystals make noise when you hit them with silverware. This is what happens when you get good silverware. So he proceeds to make a song and beatbox. which I'm pretty sure. You know what? Look, let me just stop right here. Look, okay. I'm pretty sure this has happened to nobody else in the world. I'm pretty sure you've never seen this.
I've never seen this happen. No.
I've never seen somebody just randomly beatbox at a table, but apparently for Will Smith, this is just what you do when you get good crystal. So he begins to make it. I'd say it's a nice beat. I like the beat. I'd rap to it. I'd write a song to it. I'd even sing to it. But Hilary isn't so taken with it. Not at all. So she sets him straight, but her setting him straight seems to open up the DJ side of Will Smith and say, any requests? Once again, these are things that I have never seen. But we go on. Ashley says a wonderful prayer, Will Smith inspired, as this whole episode is. And it is very, very, very interesting for the rest of the people. So from then on, you know, they have the rest of the dinner. They cut to the next scene, and Will is retired for the night. He's playing Nobody Knows the Troubles I've Seen because he just doesn't know what world he's been thrown into. He's gone from West Philadelphia to Bel Air in light years, and he just doesn't know what to do. So that is when he encounters Uncle Phil's full-on disappointment, and I wouldn't say shame. I'd just say disappointment. He was just very disappointed in his actions, and this is where you get to the point where Uncle Phil starts to see where he came from and where Will is at right now. And, you know, I think at the end of that scene, you know, you get a little bit of clarity of it, and I think it was just a great wrap-up of what all had happened, because it was just craziness and a whirlwind of culture clash. And then at some point you start to see, he's not completely different from me. He's just me as a teenager. You know, so I mean, it was definitely a good wrap up for the show. And I think it gave a lot of insight to where they were definitely trying to take the show and what they were trying to show in this first episode, which is when you get cultures and you just mash them together, some hectic things are going to happen. But at the end of the day, you're all just people.
It's amazing to me how much this was clearly a comedy, and yet they were able to put in so many heavy moments to make sure that this show actually had the weight that made it so accessible for everyone else. Because what was impressive about it was you really could see how any generation could find this impressive. The younger generation could find Will entertaining and see themselves in him. And then the older generation can appreciate what Uncle Phil then has to go through so that he can essentially raise an adopted son that he has no obligation to take care of whatsoever.
And no idea how to do it.
That's the biggest thing. He does not know how to handle Will, which is really, really shown when we meet Carlton.
Extremely shown. Because Carlton did not say one word out of place, nor out of pronunciation, or out of character. Carlton is the A student in your class who always turns in the homework on time.
And actually, that's one of the things that makes it so impressive, because from the moment that this show went on the air, it set up everything exactly as it needed to be set up so that you could have that juxtaposition. You could see these differences. So even opening up with this big pastel fluorescent theme song, which is incredibly one of the most iconic theme songs.
Yeah.
And in this pilot episode, we get the full version of the theme song. In later episodes, they would end up cutting it to a shorter version so they could fit more story into it. But this time we actually get the full theme song with the extra verses where we get to see Will in first class with the orange juice.
Yep.
All of those other little parts to it. If you haven't seen it, we'll put it up on our social media pages so you can check it out and give it a listen. We'll put up a YouTube link on there.
And it's just awesome because you start to see all the little stuff that you didn't know even was there. Like I think every time I've been out to karaoke, somebody's like, "Hey, I'm gonna do the Fresh Prince theme song." Apparently, we don't know the whole full Fresh Prince theme song.
We don't.
So anybody who can do the full thing without having to go look for it, kudos to you, because I don't think millions of people have even heard or seen the full thing.
And if you would like to tag us in an Instagram video of you doing the Forgotten Verses, or you can just do the whole thing in several different Instagram videos. You can also use YouTube, but we like Instagram. but feel free to tweet it to us if you do it on YouTube. Show us your version of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song, the full version.
Yeah.
And we'd like to see that.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my favorite things is, you didn't even realize it, that Bob's Big Boy was in there.
Where was he in there?
He was in there. You got to go look again. Bob's Big Boy was on the wall.
Okay.
He was on there. You have a lot of you got a lot of things. I've seen like what was it? The Big Sean video where he's sitting in the throne like he's the Fresh Prince. Like there's so many different things that people have taken from this, but I don't think anybody will ever be brave enough to do a Bob's Big Boy theme rap video based on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I could be wrong.
And if you are, then we'll fit it into errors and omissions if someone sends it to us.
Hey, if it hasn't been done, I suggest that you go out and do it. That is the forgotten character in all this.
Which sets it up nicely, because where this show gets off on the right foot with a theme song, it takes a right second step as well. Because the first person that we meet after we meet Will is Jeffrey.
Yes.
Jeffrey is the perfect epitomization of everything that the Bel-Air lifestyle that Will's about to walk into represents.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing because what he ends up doing is we see the lifestyle he's walking into and the person that he is. And you get all of these awesome in-jokes because you see the cultures clashing right off the bat.
Yeah, it's funny because, I think even in the show's jokingness of him thinking it was Uncle Phil, I mean, part of him probably didn't think it was Uncle Phil, but that was just the first person who looked like him in Bel-Air.
Now, what was amazing to me was that they were very comfortable making race-oriented jokes in this scene. Like there was a sharecropper joke right off the bat.
There was a bunch of one-liners, but I mean, I think that's part of what they were going for with that whole culture clash. Bel-Air isn't a neighborhood where you would see a lot of black people dominating at that time. That would be a very white area, and I mean, I think
it still is actually.
It still very is, but I mean, I think the funniest thing was when they went on about the Reagan joke, because who lives next door to Ronald Reagan?
Nobody lives next door to Ronald Reagan.
But apparently, the people in Bel-Air feel comfortable enough that they can talk about Reagan like he's just the guy next door, even though he's about 2 miles over, because those Bel-Air homes are
enormous. They're sprawling. You don't know your neighbors.
Yeah.
You have an estate that takes up the equivalent of what would be 3 neighborhood houses, so that you can fit the pool, which they have, and the tennis courts, which they have. And then for the second season, they clearly just bought the house next door and knocked it down so that they could have even more space.
Of course.
Because one of the things you'll see, this first season has a different house than what most people remember from the show. They actually got a bigger house, a bigger set in the second season. So this first season has a completely different look. It has a different feel. Things are turned around. Things aren't positioned the way that we ultimately remember them. And things feel backwards in a lot of ways, which helps with the tension, because once we've set the world that we're living in, it's nice to see a little bit of harmony, because we know that Will is going to be the source of all of the headbutting.
Of course.
But right off the bat, we've got this house that feels different from what we know.
Yeah, and it's the perfect family. I mean, it's like a grown-up middle class, if you will. It's like they've graduated from the middle class and now they're in Bel-Air. So it's a great picture of what you would like your family to be. Because I can probably talk to a couple families from Bel-Air. I don't think their kids were that well behaved.
What Jeffrey set up and was continued throughout the rest of the episode was that everyone who shows up in a pilot has their role to play that's ultimately going to set everyone up. And these actors, they played them to a T.
Yeah,
it was brilliant. I mean, even Will, you could tell Will Smith was acting. This was his first acting job.
Yeah, you could see in the scenes where he wasn't talking, he was nervous. He had the hands behind the back. You could tell he was waiting for his line.
And he was trying really, really hard in the opening scene to be as hood as he possibly could. And I'm not sure, I feel like by that point, as we touched on in the last episode, when you've made so much money that the IRS is coming after you, I'm not quite sure. Exactly.
If it might have been like the feds or the CIA or the DA, you'd still have some cred. But when the IRS come after you, I think you've made enough legitimate money that you lose. I'm going to go with 85% of that credibility.
Yeah, I would agree with that because he's trying really, really hard.
Yeah.
And the only person who doesn't seem like they're trying that hard is James Avery playing Uncle Phil. He just nails that father authority figure role perfectly to a T.
Oh, yeah. The disappointed look, the what is he wearing, the what is he saying, I don't understand this kid, all that. That's all things that fathers go through with their newly discovered teenage child who just thinks that they know more than everybody all of a sudden.
And it pairs nicely because Aunt Vivian, she plays that somewhat bored housewife with that eccentricity who needs to run the entire household, that's strict but also very fun-loving and lets the kids get away with things.
Of course. I mean, you saw that when she gave Will the hug. Uncle Phil just walked in like, okay, another mouth to feed.
And then we get a fat joke.
And you know what? I like that about the show, the fact that they didn't even waste any time. The first thing that Will said to Uncle Phil was a joke. Like, that was the perfect setup, because that's going to be the relationship from then on out.
It is amazing. You certainly have grown, Will.
Well, we all have.
Then we meet Ashley, who a lot of people would say that Ashley is ultimately the representation of what Will is going to be in later seasons, because she's the one who then becomes the rebellious teenager in later years as Will becomes a little more older, a little wiser, and becomes the father figure in many ways to her, despite the fact that he still ends up getting into some wacky hijinks. But you see that laid down in this episode because they're building this relationship. He's teaching her to rap. She, instead of saying a normal grace, decides that she's going to rap for everybody.
It's the best prayer. If you have not learned that prayer, you should learn it before you eat.
So at this dinner where Will decided he was going to beatbox and play some music on the crystals, Ashley is asked to say grace, and instead of saying, "Dear Lord, thank you for this food that we eat," no, full on, very well written rap song that she clearly had busted out at Will's musing, at his inspiration to her to find that creativity inside of her.
Hey there, Lord, my name is Ashley Banks. My family and friends want to give you some thanks. So before this dinner's all swallowed and chewed, thank you, God, for this stupid food.
Yeah, because she's the purity of it all. She's the one who sees the cool older cousin who's not Carlton. He's the fun older cousin. So anything he says, he could say she could fly, and she would fly. And
the only female that she has above her other than her mother is Hilary in this case. And the first thing that we hear Hilary saying is, "Dad, I need $300.
Yeah.
She is playing, I recognize that she's in Bel Air, but she is playing a much more typical rich valley girl.
Yeah,
in this
that's
particular
the quintessential character right there. That's the one character that I can believe a lot of parents in Bel Air have.
And she pulls it off very nicely about she needs $300 so she can get a new hat, so she can impress Bruce and Demi and either Charlie Sheen or Emilio Estevez. She can't remember which.
Yeah, I mean, when you have that many famous friends, it just doesn't matter. You just need a new hat.
Because how else can you fight air pollution if you don't have a new hat?
And then you have to ride around the city in a bus.
A diesel bus, no less.
A diesel bus, to let everybody know about the air pollution and that it should stop.
And then you have a huge bonfire to start the celebration, which is great for the environment.
Of course, because that is the most wonderful thing to do in the world if you want to let people know about pollution.
Bonfires are actually quite wonderful, regardless of whether or not you're trying to fight pollution. I have had some wonderful times at bonfires.
I can say I've polluted the world with a couple of bonfires myself.
And the marshmallows were delicious.
Yes, they were. The s'mores were awesome, and the world is still fine.
And How many bonfires think Carlton's been to?
I'm gonna say off of one hand, none. That's just me, but yeah, I could be wrong. He could be the bad boy in all this.
Because he really does play this nerd character, and Debbie Allen, who directed the episode, I can almost see how she would have instructed him to say, I want you to play this as Caucasian as humanly possible.
Or young Republican.
I feel like those two things can be pretty synonymous.
I mean, we're saying the same thing, but we're not saying the same thing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, anytime someone says that Bryant Gumbel is their hero, you kind of know everything you need to know about them right off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who says darndest or anything along those lines when talking about Bryant Gumbel or any one of their heroes, you know, you kind of get a sense of how they are. Yeah, not even just who they are, like how they conduct themselves.
And he comes in wearing all pink with the now iconic sweater tied over the shoulders.
Cable knit sweater that was probably either Chaps Ralph Lauren or, I'm going to go with a strong Chaps Ralph Lauren. You know, because I don't think that they had a giant budget for it.
No.
And Ralph Lauren was pretty big then.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
So I'll go with the chap sweater, the pink chap sweater, or paisley, or, blush.
The fashion in this show, especially in that first episode, is in many ways used as a character to represent the differences that we ultimately see between the two of them. Because everyone's very prim and proper, except for Will.
Yeah. I call him Neon in this.
He is very, very neon, because when he shows up to this party that Uncle Phil is throwing, you cannot describe what he is wearing. You can't describe the look of horror that is on the faces of everyone. So the shirt he is wearing is the type of color you see when you've done a bunch of Molly.
Yeah, I mean, everything on Will for the first few episodes is Technicolor.
Yep.
You might, some of you might not be able to remember Technicolor, and when you used to get all the colors that would be
color
on the
bars.
Screen. Yeah, you get all. He was wearing literally all of them on one shirt, as loud as possible.
And then the cummerbund, which is normally worn around the waist,
is on the chest,
just right there on the breastbone, with about 2 inches below where the bow tie is, and the bow tie is just around the neck. It's not on a collar.
Yeah, I think Will Smith went a little Chippendales very early and didn't even realize it. I mean, it was for straight comedic value, but it was very Chippendales.
And the shoes, it was a very, very set idea for the shoes, because the Air Jordans were iconic at the time.
Of course.
And
still are.
He wore them, though, in such a way where the laces were not there.
Yeah.
That was just the style of the time. And he rocked it, but that's not what you expect to see.
In a tuxedo.
No,
definitely not at all. That's definitely a fashion faux pas if you're not on a sitcom. Like, if you tried to show up anywhere like that, I'm pretty sure nobody would talk to you.
And they, in this scene, I think they tried a little bit too hard with trying to give Will a funny line, because at one point, and Vivian says, Will's going to be going to Bel Air Academy. One of the law partners says, oh, I fence there. Now, fencing is a term for selling something on the black market, so Will responds with, oh, how much do you think we can get for that stereo?
And that's when everybody knows the cultures are completely different, because they don't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Nobody knows what they're talking about in that scenario. And then we end up with this very well done but slightly drawn out monologue from Hilary about why she again needs to save the universe from air pollution. And they spend 3 minutes on this setup and then 10 seconds on the throwaway joke when someone asks, where can I send a donation? And we get the Valley Girl, I don't know.
I mean, that's just it. That's the explanation of Hilary Banks.
Do you think that was necessary, though, in that scene? Or was that done more for time? Because we had the scene prior where she's already explained why she's going to this bus.
It's definitely a filler. You could definitely tell it was a filler because even the shot, the way that they just went straight to the shot, you just showed Hilary at first, and it looked like Hilary was talking to herself, and then you show that, she's not crazy. She's actually talking to a person. There's somebody else there.
I don't think this justifies her not being crazy.
Well, I mean, at first, this is the first, okay, we're going to give her a chance. And then, right when you want to say, Hilary might have some substance. Nah.
Not a thing.
There's some stuff up there, but it's mostly air.
It gives her room to grow.
Yeah.
Which we need. But we know exactly who she is walking in now.
Yeah, you can't have a complete airhead.
So after that scene, we go to the dinner scene. We get Will's incredible beatboxing performance.
Of course, because who beatboxes at dinner?
And we get Ashley's rapping performance, because who doesn't rap at dinner?
I mean, how can you not make it through dinner without a rap?
Which leads us to the profound moments. Because I feel that what really anchors this entire series in this first episode is Uncle Phil.
Of course.
Because James Avery is a freaking god in this episode. He takes all of these people and he pulls that patriarchal card and holds everything together somehow. Because we have very little of Carlton in this episode. We get a lot more Hilary and we get a lot of Ashley, but Carlton is almost there just kind of, we know we're going to do something with him later. Yeah. We need a good foil for Will, since we know Uncle Phil is going to be his primary antagonist.
Yeah.
So we're going to put a cousin in there who's a guy.
Somebody who he can actually battle with and maybe win.
Yeah.
He's not going to win against Uncle Phil.
Not a chance. And we see that set up in this episode because Uncle Phil shows Will who's the boss. Will, gives the whole teenage thing, man, you don't know me, I'm this and that. And Uncle Phil, he gives him the fatherly speech.
Yeah.
He talks about it. It's like, don't talk to me about Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. I heard Malcolm X speak.
Yeah, and I mean, really, I think that's another testament to the power of the show. Like, what other show, like, not even a show, what thing on TV, on their first episode, they bring up somebody as influential and controversial as Malcolm X, and being pro-Malcolm X and hearing him speak and living by his philosophies or anything like that. And I think that was just another strength of the show, because they could have the room to do that. And, even as powerful and patriarch as Uncle Phil is, he can still have room to grow on top of that, on top of being the glue of the family, because you see a lot more of Uncle Phil, and that was when he finally got a chance to really say, this is who I am.
And Malcolm X, in many ways, becomes the perfect representation of the fact that the Bankses had to fight to where they are. If you were to take this and make it a drama, bringing Will into this world is a big risk for them, because they've had to fight to get to this level where they can even say that there is a possibility that Ronald Reagan may come to a party, because they have that proximity to him.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, who lives next door to Ronald Reagan? Like, I would, if I lived next door to Bill Clinton, I'm pretty sure I don't know what I would do, or any former president.
There's not really anything that you could do, because for starters, if you live next to a president, there's a level of security that even if you wanted to, you could not surpass. It's like they call it Secret Service because you don't know what the hell is going on over there.
Exactly. Like, I could be throwing a baseball and a Secret Service man would tackle me because a ball went over the wall and hit former President Reagan in the head.
And what's amazing is that that's the only world that Ashley has known up until this point, which is why it's so incredible when Will comes in and she sees there is this whole other world that she was not privy to up until this point.
Oh, yeah. That's why I say she's the purity in all this. We see her as, the sweet, innocent kid with the smile and the bubbly disposition. And, she takes to rapping with her cousin immediately. He's like, I say that's the first relationship that he really forges, because she's, I say, gullible enough to believe everything that Will says, and believe that everything in the world that she can't see is just so amazing.
And it's clear, like, it's not really incestual, but she's got a little crush on him. Like, that's abundantly clear.
Yeah,
from
they
right
did one joke, and I think they abandoned that very quickly.
Because that could have been a whole different show.
Yeah, they didn't even acknowledge it after that one joke. It was just a mom, like, hand on the shoulder, and it's like, okay, that's cute, sweetie, go play.
Yeah, so they cut the scene where she's like, Mom, can I ask Will out on a date? And then she smacks Ashley and says, no, that's family. We don't do that.
Yeah, that's in the burned reel. That's where that is. That's in somebody's ashtray.
It's Will Smith has a bunker 50 feet below his house where he keeps the scenes that he doesn't like. There's that. There's the scene where he makes love to an alien in ID4.
Yeah, I mean, that bunker might be destroyed right about now that he knows that we know.
I mean, that's why he has the ties to Scientology. They can just sort of slide in there and be like, no, we got that Sea Org. Boom.
You know what? Delete. It's over. That never existed.
Nope. Not at all. NBC doesn't have any pull over it.
Nope. And that's just how it ended.
But it does lead to a very sweet relationship between them, because Carlton really can't be a cool big brother to her, because Carlton, he's so concerned with pleasing his father, which means that he's going to try and take on the authoritarian role over Ashley, and then Ashley's not going to come to him to be the big brother.
Yeah.
Then there's Will, who's clearly going to antagonize Uncle Phil, which creates an opportunity for her to kind of live out that bad girl side of her that everyone has.
And she's a little kid at this point. Everybody makes little jokes about their family members or their aunts, especially their parents, because you're around them all the time. Teachers and everything like that, especially when you're a kid, when somebody is really trying to just dig in their authoritative
claws,
anything on you, you're like, you know what? I have a few jokes. I'm not going to tell them to you right now because you control things for me, but when I get the chance, I'm going to sneak a few of them in.
And then you add in this other polymer where Will is just like, hey, I'm not going to hold on to that joke. And when you put that into the world, it's like, well, Will did it.
Yep.
Then it changes the dynamic of everything, and it sort of sets off the new way that things can be done.
Yeah, and it just creates that environment for Ashley to let loose, Even in the slang, when Will was in her room and just talking to her, and you see the pink and the paisley and the perfect little girl, and she was like, what? Stupid? Dope? Oh, that sounds fun.
And this episode really does have that language, that musicality to it. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that Debbie Allen was the director of this episode. For those who don't know, Debbie Allen is an incredibly multi-hyphenate, talented actress, director, singer, dancer, Tony nominated, heavily involved in many of your favorite franchises. Just one of the tops in this industry.
All of the above.
And she came in and she directed this episode, and you can really see her influence on this episode because there's a musicality to it. There is a dancer's eye over this. There's a musician's eye over this episode.
Like, when you hang up a poster, do you have your headphones on and are you dancing?
No.
Apparently, Will Smith, that's just how you hang up posters if you're Will Smith.
Now,
and I mean, that to me screamed Debbie Allen, because as a dancer, you don't just walk into a room, you dance into a room, or you find some way to come into a room in a way that only you can.
And why did he use a staple gun to put that up?
I'm not quite sure. But, who gave him the staple gun? Like I said, these are all things that were never answered. Like, hey, there's a room full of nice pictures. and the staple gun is in the top drawer. Like, it didn't quite add up.
No,
but you didn't question it because back to life, back to reality.
They clearly wanted Will to be a dancer in this, but you would think that with Debbie Allen being a dancer herself, she would have reined him in a little bit, because they just let him go to town with whatever he wanted to do movement-wise.
Well, I think that, I mean, there's a little bit of Debbie Allen in there because, you know, Tony nominated, Broadway and all that. You know, dancers like to have fun, so I'm pretty sure she was like, you know, I know what I'm doing dancing-wise. I want to see what you're capable of doing. So, you know what? Dance however you want to.
I mean, well, this essentially set up what we see in future episodes, and we touched on in the last episode, where you really can't control Will Smith all that well. You can either just sort of harness the energy that he's putting out and then let it supernova, or you can end up with a weird, contrived half-life of what you almost wanted and his attempt to do what that was.
A flailing of 6 feet plus of arms and legs that just don't quite go together all the time.
And working perfectly together with the fact that you had a 4'0" Ashley who actually did have some dance ability.
Oh, of course.
And then when you put the two of them together, they clearly created something special. And that's why that part of the episode was second only to what happened between Will and Uncle Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but what was that moment, though, with Will sitting there playing the piano, busting out a classical piece, and then they just kind of zoom in on Uncle Phil? I could not tell what was going through Uncle Phil's head at that point.
And I think that was one of the more serious notes they were trying to hone in on without having to have dialogue. I think that was one of those things where they wanted the scene to tell it, because that was right after the "you forgot where you came from" or "I know who you are, it makes me have a headache just thinking about it." But it kind of created a little bit of a bond, not so much a strong bond, but it let Uncle Phil know, well, he's not just some street kid who doesn't know anything of value.
But there was hesitation in that moment, because there was also a little bit of, I might end up killing this kid.
Well, that's always there. I mean, that was there from the beginning of this show. You know, especially with him cracking jokes on you all the time, that's always going to be there.
And what's incredible about it is how little is touched on about Will's mother and about Will's background. Mm-hmm. Because you got all of that from the theme song. You knew everything you needed to know. You got your primer right off the bat at the beginning of every episode.
Yeah.
So they didn't even have to touch on that, and immediately you have this relationship that's set up with just a few, boom, you're there.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also the first time I'd say an actor trying to play a street smart guy from the hood has any hard rules or staunch rules that are put upon him, like this is how you have to act, this is how you have to dress. You can't really put a class clown in a demure kind of attitude or a demure kind of place and expect him not to throw out a couple one-liners at you. You know, that was just the dichotomy of the whole pilot. You know, you have this very rigid, you do it this way, and then you have this guy who comes in and says, you know, I play by my own rules, I make my jokes, I have fun. And that just, it was just a circus of things. And then, you know, I think at the end of the episode they tied it together well. You know, you showed a little bit of him being serious, but you showed a good 20 minutes of him just cracking as many jokes as he possibly could and seeing how far he can get without getting in trouble.
And yet we end on these last few moments, because the last thing that we see in the episode is we have Carlton in the bathroom. We don't see him in the bathroom, but we hear him singing Paul McCartney's silly love songs.
Yeah.
It's like the most what's the word I'm looking for? Because I don't want to use Caucasian again, but there's nothing soulful about it.
It's too late because you did use the word Caucasian, but I would say straightforward.
Yes.
I believe Paul McCartney has a lot of soul, but Carlton's interpretation of it, just sucked, I say, a good 95% of the soul out of it.
But Carlton was not listening to Public Enemy.
No.
He was not listening to Run DMC.
He has the greatest hits of Tony Bennett. He sings everything in Tony Bennett right there.
Well, we know he has the greatest hits of Tom Jones.
Well, yeah. But I have the greatest hits of Tom Jones.
As you should.
You should. But my interpretation is definitely not Tom Jones. But Carlton.
What would your interpretation be of Tom Jones?
No impersonations this early, but I promise you'll get something later. I can promise you that much.
And then as our episode ends, the last thing we see, and this goes back to how I feel Hilary was really misused in the episode, because she just became this one long-running joke, the butt of it over and over and over again, because we know she's in the bathroom, we know she's taking her makeup off, and as she's exiting the bathroom, we see her hair up in a towel, face covered in cream, wearing a bathrobe, and then Will hops out and screams, "I knew it," as if to say, I just assumed that you were an alien this entire time.
Well, in meeting Hilary, if you met Hilary tomorrow at a Starbucks, would you believe that she was a real person?
That's the thing. I've met that person before on more than one occasion. So, yes, I do believe that I would accept that. And I would see that. And frankly, if you go to the Starbucks in Bel Air, you're going to meet a whole lot of that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with you. But I'd venture out to say that the first time I met a Hilary Banks type, I was baffled. I would even go as far as to say I had no words. In my mind, I'm saying, you really exist. You're a real person with skin and a life and a job and parents?
Well, she falls under the category of she's rich enough that she doesn't have to do things, and that really only puts you in two categories. You're either trying to go off and save the world and be in the Peace Corps, or you're just trying to make your world as good as possible with little understanding of what anyone else around you actually does or perceives about you or the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah. When your life is shopping in new hats and hanging out with Bruce and Demi, what else is there?
$300 hats, that's what it is.
Yeah. But that's life in Bel Air, and that's her life in Bel Air. That's just what it is for Hilary Banks. We definitely do take her character as it is, and I kind of agree with you in the fact that she was just the butt of the joke. But she had a lot of room to grow in that area, but it was just, I don't think that she was the primary in that one. I think that even with the throwaway joke that you talk about, her lines were just kind of like, oh, well, we'll just throw this in there and see if it works. If not, we'll just play off of it. Because even in the last scene, she didn't have very many things. It was more physical comedy based on Will, and that was, once again, you throw Will in a situation and just see what he does.
And that's where we come back to what we said about the pilot. We know that Hilary is not very well developed, but we set up something that can probably be used later to create some level of conflict with that antagonism, where she can then be a foil to Will's jokes, or he's in this new world and she can represent that, and just her spoiled nature is going to let him learn something, do something, have a joke at her expense. All of those things, much in the same way with Carlton. So the only person that we really do get any development from is Will.
Yeah.
Because he's the one who has to change the most.
And I mean, it's definitely a stark reality change between Ashley and Hilary, because Ashley is taking it all in. Hilary isn't even aware that there's somebody new in the house until pretty much the end of the episode. She just comes home. Oh, you live here now? Okay. Can I get $300 for a hat? Like that's her reality. And I mean there's so little between him and Carlton, because that was a write-off. It's like, oh yeah, you're my cousin, but yeah, you stay across the hall from me. That's all.
It's like Carlton at one point does a golf swing.
Yeah.
Golf is the most foreign game to most people, let alone whether or not you're from the hood.
No, I mean that is a specific sport. There are very few sports that you have to pay to be involved in every level, and golf is definitely one of them. Oh, yeah. So I'm pretty sure that just about everybody does not know about golf.
So, is there anything else that you feel we need to touch on from this episode before we give our final thoughts?
Man, you know what? I will say I appreciate the one-liners. I appreciate the effort that they put into the pilot to make it as funny as possible without reaching that corn status where it just got a little too corny. And because they would throw away jokes, but it was at that corny stage. It's like, okay, if we go any further than this, then it's over. It's just not going to end well, and there's nobody that can save us from it.
And we're grateful for that.
Yeah, that's all I got. We weren't corny on the first episode. Mm-hmm. I wanted to watch the second one then. I want to watch the second one now.
When we actually start to see what it's like for Will to live in Bel Air.
Yeah.
As opposed to what it's like for Will to be in that house.
Yeah. Because that's definitely two different worlds. Because living in Bel Air, when we see him venture off into meeting other people from Bel Air, it's definitely different. He meets a myriad of characters that are still from Bel Air, but they're just not the Banks family. The Banks family, I think, are aliens to him right now.
But even more than the fact that they're aliens, they're less alien-like than the people who ultimately become part of his world outside of the Banks family, because they end up taking him much like Ashley. And that's what happens when you go to work or go to school. You may love a person, you may think a person is interesting, they may make your life a living hell, but at the core of it, you get to leave them at the end of the day, so you can probably find something endearing about them. Mm-hmm. What you can't do is find something endearing about someone who's annoying you that lives with you.
Yeah. That's a whole other dichotomy right there.
So that's the reason that Uncle Phil and Carlton don't find Will's antics, his take on the blazer from the Bel Air Academy, or his take on fashion, or his take on social issues, to be quite as amusing as everyone else does, because they have to share a bathroom with him, as Hilary and Carlton just learned.
And share a dinner table knowing that he might play a song on the Nice Crystals again.
Which was a great song.
It was a great song. I loved it. Matter of fact, I might use it for something. I'll find a way.
All right, we can use it on here. Maybe we can sample it for some music sometime.
We will find a way. I guarantee you, people, we will find a way. The Crystals will be back.
We already have a will, so there must be a way. I couldn't resist making the worst joke I could possibly make.
You did it, and you did it with confidence, without hesitation, so I gotta respect you for that one there.
And listeners, we hope that you respect us too for it.
You've got some corny jokes too. You're just too afraid to say them.
And don't be afraid to say them. In fact, please send them to us. We are on social media. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram @SoFreshSoPrince. You can send us questions on Tumblr. You can send us comments. We're going to have pictures. We're going to have quotes. We'll tweet out links of some of the things that we talked about in this particular episode on all of our social media platforms. But talk with us, because we want to hear from you. And more than anything, please, if you like us, please go on iTunes, rate us 5 stars. That's how you can share the love, and other people can find us. And that way we can create this community, a community that is not only so fresh, but also so Prince.
Of course. I mean, you love the show, otherwise it wouldn't be on many networks because you're watching it. And you're watching it while I'm watching it. So we're talking about the same things.
Yes, because that show is never going off the air.
Never.
I mean, and you can tell a show reaches a breaking point where it loses some of its value, it loses some of its marketability, people don't see themselves the way they once did, and that's usually when it ends up on Netflix. So Seinfeld, still hilarious, it's on Hulu.
Mm-hmm.
Friends, still hilarious, but it's on Netflix now.
Yeah.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, it's not on Netflix.
It's still on TV.
It's on Nick at Night. It's on BET. It's still there because that's one of those things where when you see it on television, you're going to watch it.
Yeah, it might not be your first, second, or third choice, but on a random Sunday afternoon, you're going to sit down and watch it. And then because you watched it once, you're going to watch 2 episodes, you're going to watch 3 episodes, and by the end of the day, you've probably watched maybe half a season.
Because it's so easy to watch half a season. I mean, the 22 minutes of your life, again and again and again, can very quickly turn into a full afternoon.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week with the second episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We'll be talking about more things within the episode. We'll see how these characters grow. We'll see how they move forward. In the meantime, hit us up.
Yeah, let us know what you think and how you would have, what your take on the characters is. We know what we think, but we want to know what you think. We want to know what you think. If you liked Will, if you were a more Uncle Phil type, or if you were a Carlton or a Hilary. Matter of fact, I want to hear from some Hilarys. Definitely drop us a line on Instagram, on Tumblr, on Twitter. I want to speak to some Hilarys. I want to speak to some people who actually grew up in Beverly Hills, in Bel Air, and these places that this was normal.
Tell us if we're wrong, why are we wrong?
Yeah, because it's clear that I did not grow up in Bel Air. Now, if you want to create a time machine and we could switch places, I am all for it.
Yeah, but then we might not be sitting here and this podcast might never exist.
This is true, but I'd come back and I'd just share both sides of the fence.
Oh, so we're talking like alternate reality type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I can get behind that.
Yeah, and by now you're probably not listening. This is just for us now. I could have sworn we stopped recording, but you're still here. So we thank you for listening. Definitely come back. Definitely comment. Definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, next week.